We're but 2.5 weeks out from Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. Their training camps are winding down. Both men are ready. All that's left is for me to give my prediction to solidify the outcome of this fight. And guys, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I realize that even though Dricus Du Plessis is still sloppy, even though Sean Strickland has some of the best defense in MMA right now, it won't matter. Because Dricus Du Plessis is knocking Sean Strickland out cold at UFC 297. Now, if you guys have been watching my content recently, then you know that I've been leaning towards Strickland throughout the past couple of months. And the main thing that I was concerned with for Dricus Du Plessis going into this matchup was his gas tank. I was thinking that, okay, Dricus Du Plessis still has a questionable gas tank. Sean Strickland has all of these 5-round fights under his belt. He has so much experience in the deep waters. He's got a better gas tank. He could break Dricus Du Plessis because Du Plessis is going to be swinging and missing, and I don't think Du Plessis is going to be able to push his pace for more than a round and a half. But I've changed my mind on Dricus Du Plessis' gas tank because I don't only think that it's good. I think that Dricus Du Plessis has one of the most underrated gas tanks in all of MMA. You heard that correctly. Dricus Du Plessis is one of the only fighters that I've watched. Once again, I understand this guy mouth breathed in his early fights. I understand he looked tired, but the last time I checked, he was the one that was finishing Robert Whittaker in the second round and breaking Whittaker. He was the one that 10-8'd Darren Till in the third round, went out there and still finished him despite having a rough second round. Last time I checked, he looked tired in front of Derek Brunson. He was the guy that totally dominated the second and finished him. All right? I think that Dricus Du Plessis is one of the only fighters in MMA. Forget what he looks like in his fights. Look at how he's actually able to perform and get his wins. He's one of the only fighters in MMA that can not only push a ridiculous pace, but every action that he uses in his fights are big actions. They're explosive. He puts everything into his punches. He puts everything into his takedowns. Everything this guy does is a big movement. And he's the only one that can keep that up. If you watch his fight with Brad Tavares, we're talking about his only decision win in the UFC, by the way, against Brad Tavares. Great fight, by the way, but you'll see exactly my point. Dricus Du Plessis was expending so much energy in the early rounds that the commentators, DC, Rogan, they were clowning him. They were ripping on him. And anyone in their right mind would probably do the same thing because Dricus was throwing everything into his shots. He was shooting takedowns. He was missing takedowns. He was throwing fancy spinning back fists, head kicks, just expending way too much energy. And the commentators were saying, less is more. What's this guy doing? He's going to gas himself out. He goes out there in the third round after 2 rounds of putting out a ridiculous pace, and he doubles his output. He not only doubles his output, but he dominates the third round, and that's his best round yet. And if you're looking at Du Plessis' career so far in the UFC, outside of the fights where he's knocking people out in the first round, as the fight progresses, Du Plessis gets better. In the third round with Darren Till, he finished him. He took it to him. In the second round with Robert Whittaker, that was his best round yet. He started to dominate the fight on the feet. Against Derek Brunson, he starts to take over in the second. This guy isn't tiring out like people say he is. I'm not saying he has a better gas tank than Sean Strickland, but what I am saying is that if you expect Strickland to go out there, survive the first round, and then it's just smooth sailing from there on out, and Du Plessis is going to be a sitting duck, you're mistaken. Okay? You're wrong. Dricus Du Plessis is going to be able to push a pace early on in this fight. And Strickland doesn't just destroy people and break people every single fight like he did against Izzy. He doesn't always destroy people early. I mean, Imavov took one of the later rounds off of him. Cannonier took a couple of the later rounds off of him. Yeah, he took it to Izzy, but in hindsight, let's be honest about this. Izzy's one of the shittiest boxers in the UFC, and I think that's just an undisputed fact at this point. His boxing's trash. He's been outboxed many times in his career. Izzy's bread and butter are the low kicks. He needs to get his kicks going, and if you check those kicks, he resorts to his boxing, and he's not a great boxer. And yeah, Sean Strickland put a great pressure game on him. But the issue with Strickland here in this fight is I do not believe he will be putting the pressure on Du Plessis. When Sean Strickland is in front of someone with a lot of power in their hands, when he's in front of someone that's willing to bite down on the mouthpiece, especially Du Plessis fights like he's willing to die in that ring. I know a lot of people say, I'm willing to die in there. No, Du Plessis really fights like that. He's willing to get hit. He throws everything into his shots. He's an all gas, no brakes type of guy with a good chin who is an incredibly imposing force in that octagon. He's a massive middleweight. I think Sean Strickland's going to be on the back foot like he actually normally does start his fights. Sean Strickland, in most of his fights, aside from the Adesanya one, aside from the Pereira one where his ego got in the way and he tried to prove a point and he ended up getting knocked out while marching forward looking like iCarly, which is another thing we'll talk about later on, Strickland doesn't always follow the game plan. But listen, I think he's going to be on the back foot because that's often part of his game. He wants people to swing and miss so he can tire them out. But I don't think that Sean Strickland has the ability to fight on the back foot in a way that's conducive to beating someone like Dricus Du Plessis. When Sean Strickland gets put on the back foot against these big punchers like Jared Cannonier, that's willing to move forward, that's also got the ability to mix it up, right? Du Plessis can go to the body. He has great body kicks. He has great body shots. He can shoot takedowns. I don't think he's going to have success with the grappling, by the way, but that's besides the point. When you have someone that's willing to back someone up with a lot of power in their hands, and you put them against Sean Strickland, Strickland's defense is always going to be good, but his offense on the back foot is like zero. That's why he lost his fight to Jared Cannonier. It wasn't because Cannonier was landing that many strikes. It's just that Cannonier was still throwing a lot more than Strickland in the later rounds, and Strickland wasn't doing much. Like, he was landing, 10 jabs per round, and that's kind of it, throwing 15 punches max. The guy doesn't do a whole lot on the back foot. When he's on the front foot and he's starting to break someone, that's when he really lets his hands go, when he's having his way. But I think that Du Plessis is going to, without a doubt, charge forward, trying to bulldoze Strickland. He will miss, but this dude is so powerful, man. Even when he was landing on the guard of Robert Whittaker, and Whittaker's got good defense too. Whittaker's known for having good defense. He's like the matador in the middleweight division that's too fast for everybody, that gets his guard up in time. Despite not being able to hit Whittaker clean on the chin, because Du Plessis was so determined to move forward and let his combinations go, three-piece combinations, fully extending on his punches, he was hitting the guard of Robert Whittaker and still hurting him and knocking his body around just because of how powerful he is. And I think that it may be harder to do that with Strickland because Strickland's a guy that will have his hands out and he'll be parrying punches and snapping punches away. But eventually, some of these shots are going to get through the guard of Sean Strickland, the Philly shell defense of Sean Strickland. And I think that he has at least 3 rounds to make that happen, okay? I think that Du Plessis has at least 3 rounds. Now, there may be the argument that when Du Plessis is resetting, when he's catching his breath, Sean Strickland is going to be in his face. He's going to be dragging him into that dirty boxing range where he's so good because he spars so often and he's used to just seeing punches come, slipping punches. And Strickland stands just far enough from you to be able to get away, but also to make you feel like he's about to throw. So that's exhausting to deal with. I still think that Du Plessis is going to be determined to move forward for 3 rounds at least, and I don't think he's going to gas out. If this guy can put in that much into his strikes, into his takedowns in a 3-round war against Brad Tavares, then he gets nose surgery, then he breaks Robert Whittaker, and he talks about how he wasn't even tired in the 2nd round, I think he can at least go 3 hard with Strickland. I mean, Imavov took one of the last rounds off of Strickland, right? Jared Cannonier, good cardio, fair enough, took some of the later rounds off of Strickland. All right, Strickland isn't always totally breaking people and destroying them in the later rounds. And let's not forget, even though I do believe, once again, Strickland could tag and knock out Du Plessis with a perfectly placed punch, perfect timing, I don't think that's that likely. Like, I think that Strickland offensively isn't that great. His defense is really what wins him his fights. All right. And I think that it's only a matter of time before Du Plessis lands a big shot on the chin of Sean Strickland after he starts to mix in some of the takedowns and some of the body kicks and some of the punches to the body. After he's just making it a really physical fight and he's so unorthodox and he's funky, but it just works. And I think that that could give Strickland an issue in this fight, because even though Strickland's the better technical fighter, Du Plessis is just an amazing fighter. And that's that. He's just good at fucking people up, okay? And let's talk about maybe the way that Strickland can win this fight, because in my opinion, I think Du Plessis is going to go out there, make it a dog fight, miss a lot of strikes, but ultimately put Strickland on the back foot, and Strickland's going to be so focused on just defending that he's not going to be throwing a whole lot of output, and that's just going to kind of feed into Du Plessis moving forward, imposing his will, doing what he wants for the most part, because he's not going to be deterred by the volume that's coming back in his direction. But let's talk about the grappling. I don't think that Du Plessis is going to have a lot of success when it comes to the grappling. I do not think that Du Plessis is going to submit Strickland. I do think his grappling is decent. He did take down Robert Whittaker, which is really impressive. We know Robert Whittaker has amazing takedown defense. But Strickland has incredible takedown defense, and he's one of the better grapplers in the middleweight division, at least defensively. No one ever holds Sean Strickland down, all right? If you guys haven't heard his conversation that he had with Alex Pereira, he always talks about how it's life or death on the ground. You get taken down, and if there's any complacency at all, that's just going to feed into a weak mindset that will make you quit in your fights.
I don't need to get up. The round is done. Practice is done. Every time you listen to that voice in your head, it takes your breaking point and it brings it lower, lower, lower. Every time you tell that voice to go fuck itself and you go a little bit past it, guess what? Now your brain is raising its breaking point. And eventually, you know what I'm saying, that's always, you always just want to keep that breaking point going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And so anytime you look at that clock and you say, oh, there's 30 seconds left, I don't want to get up, like, you're being a little bitch, man.
Every single second you're on your back is a losing moment. You need to get up. And Sean Strickland has a ton of hustle in his fights. And he's big. He's not as small as Robert Whittaker. Strickland, he may not be super lean and jacked, but he is a tall middleweight. He's a big middleweight. He's strong too. And every single time I've seen him get taken down, he pops right back up to his feet. I think he's going to shut down Du Plessis in the grappling. Maybe Du Plessis takes him down. He'll get right back up to his feet. So one would think that maybe that'll be a waste of time, but I think it'll still be good for Du Plessis to shoot those takedowns, to mix things up, just to give Strickland different looks. But ultimately, if he tries to go to the grappling too much, right? If that's his number one game plan, or if he just does not end up hitting Strickland much and still fills the takedowns, that's Strickland's way to win, right? Of course, just stuffing a ton of takedowns, also making your opponent miss. Like, this is a really competitive fight. Don't take this video as I don't think Strickland can win. I could see paths to victory. I just still think that Du Plessis is going to get it done within the first couple of rounds, but I don't expect him to have a lot of success on the ground, okay? A lot of people are saying he's going to take Strickland down and manhandle him and destroy him. I don't necessarily see that happening. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments on this fight. The last thing I want to say is I think that beating Robert Whittaker is more impressive than beating Adesanya. Not only because it was more of a shock to me, but also because Robert Whittaker is a harder guy to beat in the middleweight division, and that's just proven to be true at this point. All right? I'm not taking anything away from Strickland. I'm just saying both victories are really impressive. Pitching a 25-minute shutout over Adesanya is impressive. But Du Plessis went out there, put a pace on Whittaker, and broke him. Okay? Took him down. Whittaker has only lost twice in his middleweight career. Once to Du Plessis and once to Adesanya. The second fight with Izzy, that was a robbery. Whittaker won that fight. And if I look at Adesanya's career at middleweight, I'm looking at the fact that he's arguably, 5 out of his last 10 have been losses. One of those have been at light heavyweight, fair enough, but he's lost to Yan, he's lost to Pereira, he's lost to Strickland. I believe he did lose to Whittaker in the rematch, rounds 2, 4, and 5. Give it a rewatch. If you don't agree with me, I promise you'll probably give those rounds to Whittaker. And I think he lost to Yoel Romero. And unlike the fights that Izzy is winning, where a lot of them are close, Whittaker schools people. Whittaker is used to making people look silly. I talked about Whittaker having good defense. Whittaker's usually the guy that's too fast for everybody, that's getting out of the way of everything. He's like the matador. He makes people look foolish. Like, he really does make people look foolish out there. Whereas Adesanya, even though he's clearly beating Vettori, even though, yeah, he beat Cannonier, and that wasn't a controversial fight, he wasn't embarrassing those guys. He wasn't displaying a tremendous skill gap. Sure, he sometimes has a performance where he goes out there and he chins Alex Pereira. But all of those fights are competitive, right? The only time Adesanya wasn't in a competitive fight since he's been a champion is against Paulo Costa. Fair enough, amazing performance. And against Robert Whittaker in the first fight. But the second fight was really competitive. The Vettori fight, fair enough, clear win for Adesanya, but it put me to sleep. Okay, he didn't style on him. Cannonier fight, competitive. Okay, Blachowicz fight, lost, competitive. Both Pereira fights, competitive. Whittaker's been more dominant, and taking it to Whittaker and dominating him like that, if you're Du Plessis, like, that's actually crazy, man. And I don't think that Whittaker's washed. I think that Whittaker just ran into Yoel Romero part 2, okay? Different fighter, throws a whole lot more output, but just an absolute specimen where you just can't get him off of you. He does not let you breathe. He's unorthodox. He hits hard. I think this is going to be a tough one for Strickland, and I think he's going to go out there and knock Sean Strickland out. He will get through the guard. Cannonier was getting through the guard in the later rounds. When he was fighting Strickland like a man on a mission, he was getting through the guard, and Strickland on the back foot wasn't doing a whole lot. So I don't think Strickland's going to have the offense, the output on the back foot to be able to stop Du Plessis from charging him down like a bull, letting go three-piece combinations. Eventually, one of those is going to tag him, and I think he's going out. But don't be shocked. Don't be shocked if Strickland slips in a nice right hand down the pipe to counter Du Plessis. Maybe Du Plessis misses big and Strickland counters him with something. I could see Du Plessis getting KO'd. I could see that. I mean, no one really saw Strickland knocking down Izzy. It could happen. Unlikely. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I cannot wait for this fight. It's one of the most fascinating matchups, and it's just really great that the two best middleweights on earth are fighting each other. And we don't always get that in all of these UFC divisions these days. And whoever wins this fight, in my opinion, is going to be by far the best middleweight on the planet. And I will 100% pick them to win their next fight, no matter who it's against. If it's Khamzat, all right, if it's Izzy again, if it's someone else, I'm picking whoever wins this fight to beat the next guy. Because if Strickland wins, like, this guy really is insanely good. I mean, he's already insanely good. I've been saying he's underrated for a long time, but I think the Du Plessis, the days of me doubting this guy are just over, man. All right, I was about to pick against him, but I'm not picking against him in this one. Unfortunately, Strickland's reign is going to be short, but until next time.